I was in a hotel. I don't know, within the last year. Track Records Forum. Where were we?
Oh yeah, California.
Maybe it was somewhere. Maybe somewhere before that. Anyway, looking at the very interesting art hanging on the wall that they bought 1,000 prints of, and it clearly had music notation on it, making me think we were in Nashville or something.
That would have been last year then.
Maybe. It was hung upside down.
The notes were upside down.
I mean, all the notation, everything about it clearly was an upside down, and it was subtle enough that the person hanging it, was abstract enough too. The person hanging it probably didn't pay attention.
Didn't care.
But I think you had to look carefully to notice, the bass clef, the treble clef. And if you weren't familiar with that, I could totally see you not knowing which way to go.
Or maybe it's designed for people who are laying comfortably on the bed looking at it upside down. And you just have to change your perspective. It's like the drawing. One guy sees a 6, one guy sees a 9,
right?
And it's all about your perspective.
It is about. It's not like an author actually drew it, and it has a perspective.
You are listening to the Soapbox. I'm Paul,
and I'm Eric.
This all started out with a list. What's that all about?
So I've compiled a list over the years of things that just bother me, things that grind my gears, and I shared that list with you.
And I thought, you know what? That would make interesting conversation. Sometimes I'm going to want to agree with you, and it's just going to be something we talk about. Other times, though, I'm going to want to steel man the opposite position because I think that's just interesting conversation.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I'm always right, but Paul's just a really good debater.
Hey. Coding.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about the hospital sense of coding where somebody is about to die, although it feels like it.
Yeah.
To some people.
It does, yeah.
This made your list, and we briefly discussed this a little bit earlier today. Just a game plan, what it is that we were going to record about, what we were going to discuss today. But Eric and I both, we like the notion of kind of going in cold. Sometimes we're going to sound uneducated, uninformed, a little bit stupid on a topic. Yeah. I'm going to get something wrong. And I hope if I do, people call that out in the comments. But I know very little about the hot take here, about the position. So I defer to you. Why is coding on the list?
So civil engineering by trade, but I've always dabbled in code. From a very young age. I guess from a young age, I was exposed to it. My brother and father did a lot of programming in DOS days, BASIC, and my dad has since kind of fallen off of that interest. But my brother definitely made it a career. He's quite he made a Zelda-like video game, probably in the early. When did Zelda come out? 87 or something?
I want to say late 80s, early 90s, maybe 91, 92.
I don't. It certainly wasn't that late. But yeah, by 91, 92, I think my brother was programming. He had we actually made a map of forest, sand, grass, all the different palettes, and then he made a game where you could put tiles together and then walk through the map. I think that's about as far as he got. Maybe you could start fighting someone.
So there's no way I can go pirate this somewhere?
No, it didn't. So he went off and he kind of launched a really interesting arc of a lot more. He got more into hardware programming, so like communicating with with controllers. We talked about the Bliss box and other things. But so he's done in DMX lighting and all this stuff. So
DMX. Love that guy.
Yeah.
Murder.
So then
that was Ja Rule, wasn't it? I can tell I only listen to alternative rock.
I'm waiting for Boy Dad to come out. So I took kind of a break in coding, or really, I was younger, so I wasn't, I think I could draw a circle and paint it a certain color in BASIC. This is based like before Quick Basic or Visual Basic or anything. But then I was living on Sheridan, so this is before Gladman, and I had a cell phone. Maybe no, this is before I had a cell phone. I had a bunch of contacts in Outlook. I was just an Outlook junkie, and I put all birthdays and names and emails and phone numbers, and I had them all in Outlook. But loading Outlook it took a while. So if I wanted to call someone, I had a landline. I wanted to call someone, I needed their phone number. I'd have to load Outlook, wait, plugins, and then I'd switch to contacts, and I had to search for a contact, and then there's a number. I thought that was frustrating. And I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Why not just go to your old Rolodex?
Okay, so yeah, if you had a Rolodex, then it's on paper, right? And it's not updated.
Oh, yeah. So for anybody that is under 30 years old, a Rolodex was a little wheel with a bunch of index cards, and it rolled through them.
Yeah.
Roll index.
Yeah. Ta-da.
There you go. Yeah. Brought to you by the Dewey Decimal System, another thing nobody knows today.
So I was like, I wish there was I wouldn't even say an app. I mean, because back then you didn't call them apps. I wish there was a computer program that you could load.
I love that you're like, now I'm a baby boomer. An application for your compact computer.
So it really is interesting. Like, that was not the vernacular back then. Like, you wouldn't say, I need to build an app.
Yeah, apps were appetizers at TGI Fridays.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I was like, I want to build an application that reads data from Outlook. Because again, Outlook is syncing my work computer and my home computer. So all my contacts are in sync. This is like...
And locally on the computer too. For anybody that knows computers now, that's all web-based. And you may not have the ability to call that.
Yeah, and yeah, you could be offline. I wanted to interface with that Outlook data and present it on the screen. And I came up with Rolla Desktop. So
see, I teed it up because I actually had Rolla Desktop for a brief minute.
If you Google search, you can still find it on this insightbb.com website.
Is that still there?
It's still there, and you can download it.
There's some guy that's renewing that domain,
I guess, or that maybe they never got rid of it, and maybe there's some, I don't know, the service providers might still use it. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it was free space I got for having broadband internet, which I don't have that company anymore. So you can still,
they don't exist. Yeah.
you can Google search that, and I had a hit counter on it, a donate button.
Does the donate button still work?
I don't know what it's tied to. It's tied to PayPal, so it probably does.
Okay.
Cha-ching.
Yeah. So brought to you by anybody that finds that and presses the donate button.
So you can download this program, and this is actually version 2 is the one that's posted, which was visualbasic.net. Before that, it was VB6, which some people, that was a big deal. Before that, I guess it was in QBasic, QuickBasic.
You understand most people listening hear BB8 or C3PO or R2D2.
Right, that's fair. Point is it's basic. The language is basic, and this one in particular, VB6, had Windows forms. So the whole point of it was to mimic a Rolodex. And one of the things I thought was so nerdy about this is I had Vonage,
which is a web phone.
Voice over IP, yes, service. So we didn't have a landline phone number. We had internet-based phone. It was cheaper and whatever. So one of the features of it is you could go to a URL and put in a phone number and hit enter, and it would initiate a call to that number from your phone, and your phone would ring, you'd pick it up, and it was almost like they transferred you to that number.
Okay. Which, if I can rabbit trail for just a moment, AT&T just switched their phone service over to VoIP. So gone are the days of copper in the ground telephony with AT&T.
Just it's going to use the same lines, internet.
Which for years they used to sell that on virtue of the fact that if the copper was still on the ground, you could plug a phone into it, even if a tornado blew the house off the foundation.
And you could dial 911 for free, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, this was, so again, think about, I'm the people person, right? And I got all my contacts, all my friends, keep all their birthday. I used to be the birthday guy too. People would say, hey, when's their birthday? And Rolla Desktop did birthdays. It gave you reminders, anniversaries.
We have Facebook for that now.
Yeah, it.
So if your friends or family don't have a Facebook account, they no longer have a birthday.
Exactly.
That's how that works.
Yeah, no, I have a handful of friends that I have their birthdays in my Outlook calendar.
Am I on your calendar?
No. I have most of my friends' birthdays are on a calendar. Anyway, but no, I have a handful of friends that don't have Facebook.
Oh, okay.
And I keep it on the calendar because that's how I know. Anyway, you could. So it was all hotkey driven too. Windows key, Q, pulled up roll desktop because the Q kind of looks like a Rolodex. And then it would pop up, and then you could hit any letter on the keyboard, and it would go to that last name. So Paul Ross, good example. I'd hit Windows Q, I'd hit R, and then I'd hit Control, and then I would hit another letter, and it would be their first name. So I could do Control P. And
now it printed my whole desktop.
Oops. So the nice thing about Windows Forms is if it had focus, I could control. Anyway, yeah. So I could get to most people. I could get to Windows Q, last name, Control, first name. Occasionally, I have two PRs, and then you just hit it again and it goes to the next one. But I would be that quick, and of course it was all cached, so it wouldn't even have to get on the internet. And anyway. The neat thing is your phone number would be in there, no cell phones. I could double click your phone number, and that created that link I talked about for voice over IP, and that would shoot a link. Basically, it would cause that service to kick in, and then my phone would ring. I'd pick it up, it'd ring, switch over, and then I'm calling you. I did all that because I wanted to call people, look up, and you could double click their address, and it pulled up whatever.
To me,
Google
this
Maps
is the
was
classic programmer's attitude.
Yeah.
I have something that is a mild inconvenience that costs me 3 to 7 seconds. So what I'm going to do is pour hours into making an app.
Oh yeah. Oh, and it's gonna cause.
And that's gonna save me 2 seconds per transaction. Yeah. Oh yeah, but the good news is if your lifespan unnaturally becomes 500 to 600 years, you're going to get that time back.
Oh yeah. So here's and jokes aside, here's what happened. I did all this because I wanted this feature, and I had a handful of friends that actually used it too. Kevin used it, and we had rad days that were birthdays, anniversaries, like dog birthdays, and you could put all this stuff in, and it created events, and it would remind you.
Who knows their dog's birthday?
We always,
do you just arbitrarily pick the dog birthday, or do you actually know?
We always pick a holiday near when we think the dog was born, because we've always had
like
puppies.
A gotcha day, like this when we adopted the dog.
Yeah, we never did the gotcha days, but we did we got the dog this day. It was about 3 months old, so kind of guess. So dogs' birthdays are Halloween or Friendsgiving or.
We're going down another rabbit trail, but you have now you've poked me in a sore spot. When my parents decided to get a dog again, my mom had a dog before she got married. It was a great dog, Rusty. I remember it vaguely as a young child. Rusty died, traumatized my mom. My parents both swore an oath never getting a dog again. Something happened. They decided to get a dog again.
Yeah, you said a white dog.
And got a little white Bichon Frise.
Yeah.
Purebred.
Yeah.
Because apparently we wanted to be that family. I don't know why.
This is the whole episode right here.
Hypoallergenic.
Yeah.
That was the reasoning for that. But they give the dog a name. And what do you name a dog, right? Pop culture reference, Fido, Fifi. Maybe if you're feeling really evil, you could name it after a girl you didn't like in high school. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But my parents went the other direction, and they named the dog Reginald Sampson. Like, they gave the dog a more regal name than they gave me.
You and Dan.
So he was Reggie for short. Rabbit trail over.
Yeah, okay.
Treating dogs like people.
So all jokes aside, I spent all the hours working on this thing, built this thing, and I got use out of it. I got enjoyment out of it. Kevin got to use it. A handful of other people I know in the world have downloaded it. Some people used it. It still works, by the way, the newest version. Crashes a little bit here and there, but it still connects to Outlook. I learned to code. I learned WinForms. I learned how to do call internet calls, because I think this was around the same time I invented blogging.
You invented blogging.
I invented blogging.
I didn't know I was in the room with a celebrity.
Yeah. So I was in a band called Orange Whip, and
I have your CD. I found it at Goodwill.
Did you really?
I did. You're famous. You're Goodwill famous.
That just means someone gave up the CD.
I got it for 50 cents. So
Nice. So Dan Endlin was our guitarist, singer, and well, we all sang. None of us were good at it. Jonathan was the only one that got good at it, and now he sings for his band. Dan wanted to update the website, but he didn't. And this is InsightBB. I think InsightBB again. He didn't know how to web develop. I had FTP software. I had Dreamweaver. Was that?
Oh yeah, the Adobe. Basically, it was an advanced notepad.
No, Dreamweaver was who did Flash? Macro.
Well, they all got bought by Adobe. You can download Dreamweaver right now in Adobe Creative Cloud.
Okay. Well, before they were bought, I think that the people that owned Flash made
Macromedia.
Macromedia. Anyway, Dreamweaver was like the equivalent to whatever Microsoft front page. Microsoft had a web tool.
It's harder to remember Microsoft titled things because they changed the name every 3 years just to mess with you.
They try to keep the colors, like Word is always blue, Excel's green. Anyway, I was doing web development in either front page or Dreamweaver, and we had a cool Flash logo intro thing that we had. My brother helped me with that because he was a Flash guy. Turns out,
great skill to have.
Yeah, Apple killed that.
Sorry, Sean.
That's
Hold on.
That's why Sean doesn't like iOS. So we had the website, and Dan wanted to update, but I was like, all right, Dan, you got to get an FTP server. You got to do this and then upload it and all that. And he's like, I can't do any of that. Is there an easier way? I was like, well, I guess I could build an app, VB6, that would download
computer application.
It will download the HTML file. So let's say in this case he wants to update. He wanted to just put like a post saying today's date, something we're working on, interesting thing, history and music history or something, and just post it. Okay, this didn't exist. Nobody was doing weblogs or
Blogger.
Right. I don't think any of that was around. It certainly wasn't integrated to our website. So I set up a program that downloaded the page that he wanted to update. He would type in the date into a form. He'd did title into the form, and then whatever message body he want. And he'd hit submit. It would download the HTML file. It would look in the HTML file for like a comment that I put in there to say, this is the current spot. It would paste in the things he typed, do it all in HTML and put the coding around it, and then put that comment back in. So the next time we do it, we do it. And then.
So it sounds like you didn't invent blogs. It sounds like you invented like SourceForge or what's the one you use? GitHub.
GitHub. I mean, GitHub's more for like code repositories. This literally it was like a Facebook post. He wanted to put a Facebook post on our webpage. And this maybe even before MySpace.
Rest in peace, Tom. Who's probably not dead.
And he made a bunch of money when he sold it.
And he's not a villain. So he knew what's up.
Look at that. Anyway, so Dan was able to update the website from his house without FTP, without any knowledge of HTML coding. And anyway, so all of that, those two efforts really got me into coding.
Gotcha.
They ripped that Band-Aid off because I was.
So if we're going now full circle to the whole theme of the podcast, me taking counterpoint here.
Yeah.
It sounds like what you're telling me is, hey, learn to code.
Yeah.
Now, a little historic context for folks that may not understand why that is a interesting statement. It was less than half a decade ago, we started to see a bunch of folks that would throw around the terminology "learn to code" as a response to blue-collar workers being afraid of automation.
Yes. Yeah.
So this touches a little bit on our automation AI stuff that we've talked about in the past, but learn to code was sort of the canned response for anybody that was going to be out of work because computers were going to take their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And then within the last probably 18 to 24 months, suddenly these large language models have gotten to the place where they are pretty good at coding, and anybody that's learned to code is now fearful for their job.
Right.
So what do we learn to do now? But you're still an advocate for code. You're still an advocate that people learn to code. Why?
So I think there are a bunch of reasons. And as a civil engineer, having coding experience really gives me a leg up on, some of my peers, because I'm able to automate some really complicated tasks. They know how to do a complicated task. They know how to do the math. And a lot of these folks are really good at Excel. But those,
Wait, that's not coding?
So, I mean, Excel is a version.
That's my favorite database.
All of those words are bad.
My friend Katie, I'm gonna tag her on Facebook later. Just know every time she says Excel is not a database on Facebook, I always chime in. I'm like, well, actually, knowing full and well it's not. But.
Excel is kind of like a gateway to coding, if statements and VLOOKUPs and things. And of course, if you accidentally hit alternate F11, the macros pops up, and now you can.
Unless you own a Mac.
Right, maybe a different hotkey.
I don't think it has the macros. I don't think it has the VB integration.
Oh, it probably doesn't. Yeah,
it didn't when I had a
Mac. That would make sense. Yeah,
but yeah. Anyway,
so yeah, you can and again that. I say again, but actually I'm thinking macros was also where I cut my teeth in, because you could actually record a process in Excel and then see the code it generated
and kind of tweak it.
Yeah. And so that's how I kind of cut my teeth. I took Quick Basic in college, just one semester class. I wrote an app, Quick Basic. So this was all formless. So it was just a command prompt to order a pizza. Because I worked at Little Caesars at the time, so
you could have sold that to your employer.
I could have. We could have had a computer in there, and anyway, a lot of my programming has been for things I wanted to make my life easier.
Yeah, because you made a garage door opener. I think we've talked about this when we were actually talking with Horace.
Yeah,
but you were automating things with web calls and. I was always very, very impressed to come into your garage. It was kind of like going into a mad scientist's laboratory, because you had all the cool toys out. So
and I dabbled a little bit in that. Again, these are all, keep in mind, these are all lanes I'm really shouldn't be in. I'm not, IEEE certified to build a device and have you plug it in your house. Certainly not.
Yeah. And you are an engineer, but not of the mechanical, electrical, or computer science variety.
But I've enjoyed using code to help with a lot of things. With my job, certainly, I've built web apps and desktop apps, and the Excel functions and things to merge data in. So I feel like I keep circling around the point where I'm trying to make, which is I think a lot of people are afraid to get into coding.
Yes,
just because it is daunting, right?
Well, can I give you my counterpoint here? Midstream. I was interested in computers from a young age, and I didn't follow like the MSTC track or anything in high school, so I feel like I was a little bit behind because I didn't get the prep work that I needed ahead of time. But then I jumped 2 feet first in college into computer science, and I won't name check people here, because one person, let's just call her Lebby Mean.
Fair enough.
Who's a computer science professor at the University of Kentucky. And
no one could look that
nobody could possibly figure out who I'm talking about.
No.
Her philosophy in undergraduate studies was get a teacher's aide, have them teach the entire course, be minimally involved, and then whatever the teacher's aide does or says, back them up even if it's wrong. Which is a flawless way to get paid to not do a job.
Sure.
And set me up for failure, I think, because we'd have one teacher's aide who was actually a pretty cool guy. I can't remember his name, who would teach the section. And then we'd have a second, like, smaller lab with this other guy who's also named Eric, by the way. I won't name drop his last name, but Eric was the kind of guy that had never been in charge of anything, never tasted power, and went full Nero in our class.
Wow.
He for the first time ever got to be the guy, got to be in charge. He made fun of the fact that I had a Dell laptop, like that was a weird thing. So like mocking his students, which I didn't think was cool. And then we were programming in C++, which is a very unforgiving language. You can create an infinite loop
Yeah.
accidentally and crash your whole computer because the compiler will just run it ad nauseum.
Let me rabbit trail a second.
Okay.
Because that's a great one. When I took the computer class that we had to take as a civil engineer, it was Quick Basic. Years later or before, before that was Fortran. Years later, they ended up switching to like one of those, MathCAD or no, Maple, or it ended up, it wasn't a programming language, but it was more like a
suite.
A suite of like you could send commands. Anyway, point being, I never knew this at the time, but it didn't cost civil engineering any money to require you to take this computer science class because they already have someone teaching it. They already have a curriculum. They can just add it to our program and boom. Now, if we wanted our own computer science, like computer science,
that was engineering centric, maybe,
then we would have to pay, the
salary
and the
overhead,
whatever.
Yeah.
So we were at the mercy of whatever computer science department wanted to teach that year. So C++ is about the dumbest computer language to teach to people that aren't going to like
do hard code.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
we're talking circa 2001, 2002,
Yeah.
and at this point, I'm not sure what the situation was, but I do know that it was one of these situations where, like, first week of class, you're producing Hello World.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, C out, right?
Yeah.
I can do this, no problem. And then it was like, okay, now give directions to Rob the robot to go to the grocery store and navigate this maze. And it was like, whoa. Like, what about Hello World? How are you doing? Can we graduate into
Guess
this?
my number.
And it got incredibly, like, the pace was just, it was off. It was not something that if you had no prior experience, you would be primed for success in. And then to top that off, we got two major problems that happened in this course. One, we were told, oh yeah, don't forget to comment your code. And then every line of code where we didn't comment, we missed a point. So you could have fully functioning code, and if you missed a tab space for formatting or a comment, you'd lose points. So you'd have a fully functioning piece that would be like a D-.
Wow.
And then we also had a situation where we said, hey, this is really hard. Can we work on this together? And in class, we were told, yes, sure. So we'd go to somebody's dorm room, and it was like a night of somebody would be playing video games in the corner, and we'd take turns playing video games and cycling through the code problem and eating pizza and trying to figure out the logic. And then eventually, 2, 3 a.m., we'd get it. I didn't live on campus, so I'd have to drive home, but we were like satisfied that we had collaborated, come up with the solution, and then we got accused of cheating.
Because you all had the same code.
Well, we had the same logic, right?
Yeah.
We worked on our own code, but we solved the problem the same way because we collaborated and we asked if we could. And so this computer science professor sits us down and just absolutely lambastes us. Oh, you could be, expelled from the university, and we could get an academic integrity mark on your transcript, and blah, blah, blah. And we're like, what is we're allowed to collaborate mean?
Yeah.
And so we brought this defense, and basically what the compromise, air quotes, the compromise that we were given was, well, you're going to receive a 0 on the assignment, but we're not going to take it any further. And I should have gone right there. I should have gone to the ombudsman and made my case like, hey, I'm struggling in this class. I'm not that good at this. We're getting mixed messages from the professor who never teaches the class versus the teacher's aide who's just a brutal, whip against our back kind of like just awful Nero of a tyrant. And then this cool guy that's giving lecture that, you got 3 different bosses here. Like, I'm sorry, I forgot to cover on my TPS report.
Yeah. Huh. Well.
And that was my intro to coding.
Yeah.
So then later in life, I meet this other Eric who's really obsessed with coding, and he's like, oh, you should learn to code. And it was like that dog during the 4th of July seeing all the Vietnam flashbacks. Have you seen that meme?
I can imagine it. I don't think I've seen it, but yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, code? No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have similar stories, or even just you don't even really need a backstory to it. Coding is intimidating, and it's very rare that I write code and compile it and it works. You have
to iterate.
You have to iterate. It's troubleshooting. It teaches so many great like logical thinking, dealing with problems and troubleshooting. I mean, that's just, any software you use, you could use that. And yeah.
One thing I think that's, well, two things that have got me to come around full circle. One, I have been involved in projects that it was kind of code-like before I even realized it was. You and I worked together on two different tools. One CDAT and one SPFer.
Yeah. Yep.
Dubiously named.
Yeah. These are both
safety performance function in R.
Yeah.
But apparently people took onus with the effer portion.
Whatever. These are both tools we built for KTC.
For work. And so I started getting involved a little bit in ASPX and a little bit in some of this .NET stuff. And, you're doing this in Visual Basic on the back end?
Yeah, so VB.NET on the back, JavaScript for a lot of the mapping stuff, and then the SPFer tool you're talking about actually calls R commands, so the statistical software R.
Which I have a little experience with. When I was working on my master's, I took a class in R, and then I started to kind of cool my heels a little bit. I had success with R. I had success with some of these webby, I don't want to call them code-based, but like code-like script languages. Recently completed a project that's getting a lot of really positive attention that uses Python. So I'm back in it. I have tried, you do, for the last 2 years now, you've gotten really excited about doing this thing called Advent of Code.
Yeah, Advent of Code. So leading up to Christmas, there's an Advent calendar of sorts this guy put together, and I don't know how many years he's been doing it, but it's popular among the code nerders, I guess. And every day leading up to Christmas, he puts a puzzle out there that is usually, he explains it. Of course, it has a whole Christmas theme to it and elves and all these things. But I usually kind of skip past that bit. My bad, guy who made it. And just go to the instruction. And a lot of times it's like you have an input file and you have to count up the number of right turns that this thing made and then add up all those values together. And then you get a number and you punch it into the thing and it'll tell you if you got it right or not.
What's interesting about that, and I've done a couple of them, I've not finished all 12 either year, but you will get a different input file than I will. So it's not like we can cheat on this.
Right.
And I think this is how the computer science class should have done it, right?
Yeah,
Everybody
for
got
sure.
their own problem.
Yep.
That would have been a great solution for the person that's still teaching that class 20 years later.
Yep.
But that means that you really do have to like figure it out for yourself. And I think what's made it okay for me now is there's not one language, one thing that you have to use in order to do that. Some of them you can do in Excel.
Yep.
Some of them would benefit from using something a little bit more sophisticated.
I'd say generally though, I don't think you could do any of them manually. Like, I mean,
It
you
would
could.
be a lot of work.
It'd be a lot of
because we're talking about thousands of lines here. We're not talking about just like a 4 or 5 line thing. But also, I think the other thing that makes the barrier to entry is shattered because I can iterate with something like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I can say, hey, ChatGPT, here's a section of this problem I'm trying to work out. And it might suggest something I don't know about. It might say, oh, well, you might want to use a for loop. What's a for loop? Show me an example. And I think that's going to be the function of this thing where learn to code maybe was the inappropriate response to the blue-collar worker.
Yeah.
I think the whole learn to ChatGPT or however it's being framed now, that is not a replacement for somebody that knows what they're talking about.
No.
The hallucinations haven't gone by the wayside so much that you still don't need to know how the code works. But if you're just getting started, it's kind of that smart friend in the room, that person that you could go to, you could show your code to, and they might make a suggestion.
I heard recently someone say AI isn't going to replace your job. A person using AI is going to replace your job.
Yeah.
So you just have to decide if that's going to be you. And it's interesting. I've actually used code to help code in the past. So sometimes I've left off probably my biggest software endeavor I ever had, which was SignProx, which I actually made commercial and sold and had a lot of fun with Kenny and Well, you'd helped out with stuff too, and Clay
and
Chad. And so it was pretty cool software. You could, that people would download by. And so parts of that code were written in such a way as, well, I need to do this, 120 times. And instead of writing the code with loops and things to make that work, it was like easier to just hard code it. So I'd go to Excel, have Excel write the code and then paste it in. And then I suppose this probably disqualifies me from the Advent of Code episode. I did one of them where I didn't know how to write the code for enumerating every possibility. So like you've got a drawer full of socks, they're red and blue. How many, if you had 10 socks, enumerate every possible combination you could draw or whatever. I didn't know how to do that. And this isn't like I didn't know how to write the code. I didn't know what the logic was. So I went to ChatGPT. I said, hey, write me code. And I did it for socks or something. And what I was doing it for were digits and whatever. It doesn't matter. ChatGPT wrote the code. I took the code, put it in there. I had to tweak it, of course, because I wasn't actually doing socks. And it worked flawlessly. I was like, it did its job.
Almost feel like you cheated. I do feel like for the vast majority of people that are trying to learn code, they're not writing it themselves.
Yeah, no.
They're
Google
finding
searching
sources, Stack Overflow, and places where you can go and find a solution. Mm-hmm. You can see generally the logic of the solution, and then you can adapt that solution to your problem.
That's interesting you say, because early in my days of coding, I couldn't write code on an airplane because I didn't have the internet. And that it crippled me. Most everything I wanted to do, I had to go search. We talked about it the other day. Visual Studio comes with a library. I forget, MSDN. It's this Microsoft Network, Developers Network, I think. And I used to use that thing constantly. It would show you samples and examples. And then, of course, now I'm at the point where I can write most of the code I can write, on my own. I may have to go, how do you find the remainder, the modulus function? And I got to go get the example or whatever. But I guess I want to leave with a thought, and feel free to add too. But if you want to learn to get into this, one, ChatGPT would be a great way to start. But I think the most important thing for me, and as I pointed out on all these endeavors, come up with something that you want to automate. Come up with something that you want to do.
Yeah.
Make your life easier.
That's how I learned Photoshop, was having a project to work on, not just exploring the tools. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The one thing I'll leave on, we've talked about the AI not taking our job.
Right.
But let's foreshadow a future episode here. I don't think that's true anymore. Intel has been working with quantum computing.
Okay.
And quantum computing is going to blow this up. Yeah. It is going to be so much bigger than anything we've dealt with, seen, or talked about up until this point. So I do think it's coming for our jobs.
Yeah.
But that'll be next time on the Soapbox. Thanks for listening to the Soapbox. Eric, how can people find us?
Well, conveniently, we put everything on our Linktree site. You can go to Linktree, search SoapBox Lex, and you'll find all of our socials there, plus ways to reach us, ways to engage, and some of our original content, so you can see some of the other stuff that we do.